Today's workshop is titled Cabinets and Woodworking for My Kitchen Remodel, presented by Christoph Neander. This morning, Christoph will explain and show the planning, construction, and installation of a contemporary style kitchen. With the help of a photo diary, he will point out the principles and benefits of the European 32mm system. Streamlined procedures and quality standards different from one-of-a-kind furniture work will be addressed. Christoph was born in Frankfurt, Germany. He's a professional woodworker and has been trained in Germany in their guild system. Christoph moved to the U.S. in 1986 and settled in Santa Fe in 2000, where he's hired as an instructor in the Santa Fe Community College woodworking program. In addition to his teaching duties, Christoph does design and construction of one-of-a-kind pieces of furniture as commissioned work for homes and offices, as well as original gallery pieces. He has had entries in galleries across the country and won awards for his woodworking. Christoph's work has also appeared in numerous publications, such as Fine Woodworking and Woodshop News. Please give Christoph Neander a warm AWA welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. It's been a while, I think over a year that I've been here since, right? So, before I start with my presentation, I just wanted to do a shameless pitch myself for the community college. The gentleman who just mentioned the facility in Albuquerque that is available to members, just wanted to give you guys a heads up. At the community college right now, we are in the planning stages of developing a brand new class on operating and programming CNC routers. So it's going to be a formal credit class within our program. Right now we have actually the actual facility, the machine in place. We have an instructor already lined up. Now we have to do the Kafka-esque thing with administration on how to make it all possible, because it's in a different wing of the campus. It's not in the wood shop, so that confuses the hell out of them. Yes. How long will be the class? I can't tell you those specific details. It's going to be a regular semester credit class, but I don't know how many hours per week. Is that what you were wondering? Yeah, don't know yet. Anyway, when Steve called me and asked me for a title of this talk, actually I never gave him one, I believe. He made one up. But later on it occurred to me that a good title would be Finally the Cobbler's Children Are Getting Shoes. So, meaning that after 16 years of living in my little house in Santa Fe, I decided to basically build a brand new kitchen from scratch. And I did this with the help of a gentleman that you might know, Klaus Messerer. He's had presentations here as well. He is much more experienced in real cabinet making, production style, fabrication of kitchens, libraries, store fixtures, display cases of the like. So we collaborated on this together, yakking German all the time while we did that. And as you will see later on in the presentation, this will all be in metric dimensions. So we have a field day with that. So, but we're not going to go into all those details anyway. So please consider this just a basic introduction into kitchen making. I cannot really address all the gory details of this dimension and this measurement. It's just too much at one point. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. For 16 years, it's a tiny house, 840 square feet, including a small loft up there that you see upstairs. And I've lived with well, I might as well fess up. So anyway, as you can imagine, with 840 square feet, you cannot have a dedicated room for a kitchen. So there's the room with the tall windows to the left. That's basically a combination living room, dining room, kitchen, open area. And I will show you in a second what I lived with as a so-called kitchen. And for several years now, my partner has complained that whenever he comes to Santa Fe to visit, it's like camping. I needed to upgrade. So there you go. So this is like a bare bones, just a row of cabinets. You see the sink, you see a dishwasher to the far right. Pay close attention to the missing full-size range. Yeah, there is a two stovetop electric stove on the far left. So basically like a bachelor kitchen with a fridge standing in the middle of the room to the left. Pretty bad, but I put up with it for a long time.
Yeah.
So Klaus and I reviewed the space. My first question to him was, do you think there's anything that could be improved? And he, in like half a second, he said no. And, so basically total terror, total remodel. And key, what you have to understand is now, this is a whole different world. Most of you who have known me from previous presentations know me from designing and making very refined, custom designed pieces of furniture with a high level of precision, attention to joinery, surface treatment, and such a thing. Entering the world of kitchens is very different, and you have to strike a really good balance between trying to be efficient in sort of a production mindset, and at the same time, you have really no time to make corrections. So what you might write off in an individual piece of furniture, oh, I'll fix that joint later, is not really an option. You just need to keep going, otherwise it will just drag out for months. And so you have to have a certain level of precision while at the same time letting go of certain expectations that you had in fine furniture making. So that was an interesting balance to strike, and that's why I sought out the help with Klaus to get some guidance there, because he has a really good sense of where to draw that line. So Klaus, here we go. That's already the next picture. So this is...
we can go back if you want.
No, we can... I think that kitchen is hideous enough. So this is what we came up with. Just a basic game plan of how to lay out the cabinetry. This is obviously done on the computer now. What you can see is in blue, which is very helpful in different colors, is actual cabinets made out of melamine coated particle board. And what you see in red are actually visible surfaces in the show veneer that we choose, the kind of wood that we choose. So you always have to distinguish between internal surfaces that are never be seen when the doors are closed, and exposed panels that have a show side. I selected for this kitchen European beech, steamed European beech. It's a little darker in color than the American beech. It's also more stable because the steaming relaxes the wood some more and it doesn't warp so badly. So heads up, if you ever want to use American beech, be prepared for some wood movement after the fact. So European beech, which you can get in Albuquerque, is more stable. And I'm not just saying that because I grew up there. So red lines represent visible panels, show surfaces. Blue lines represent hidden cabinets behind the... Now, can I use this now?
No, you can use me. Tell me when you have to
Go.
use the laser thing. Okay, you can use the laser pointer. At least that appears to be working.
Flash it in his eyes when you want to.
I'll just say yes. And this view, the next view is the same setting from behind, like as if we had X-ray vision through the back wall. Let me see if you could go back and forth once or twice so you can see the difference. This is the front, this is the rear. The unit to the left now is basically an island, except no, what is that called? A peninsula. It's not technically a real island. It comes out of the wall, whereas the right unit of lower cabinets is up against the wall, like a regular kitchen would have. Yes, please. A plan view from the top. Again, the distinction between red and blue lines is important for you to understand. what is a visible beech wood surface and what is invisible melamine. I decided to go with melamine. It's super easy to clean, low maintenance as kitchen cabinets. And I know some high-end kitchens, when you go to high-end cabinet makers, they actually veneer. They use wood veneer substrates for the cabinetry. And that was just a little overkill for me. I just didn't want to do that. The melamine is just really user-friendly in cleaning. And I decided to pay more attention to my fronts, the visible faces made by doors and drawers. And you can think of that in the same way. Yes, please. So, okay. If you like to write lists, kitchens are awesome. I have made a few kitchens now in my life, and I think roughly I would estimate that between 30 and 35% of your time of making the kitchen goes into planning, which is substantially higher than an individual piece of furniture. So a lot of time goes into the planning. So you have to take, of course, measurements on site to figure out what you were given, the parameters. Then you have industry standards to incorporate a certain depth of cabinets that are considered standard. Appliances, you need to choose, you have to create openings that can receive the appliances, and they have standard dimensions. Yes, please.
Really quick, which program do you guys use to design in which program do you design? That, I'm kind of referring to the prior slides.
Right. I don't know. Klaus did that. In that department, I'm a dinosaur when it comes to that. That's a whole world for me to explore deeper. I know it wasn't SketchUp. I know that for a fact. So you end up really thinking this through more than twice. You really want to double check all your dimensions, because you know, if you find out you installed your kitchen and the dishwasher doesn't fit, you're in trouble. So lots of lists, and you can see here already the millimeter dimensions. Oh, I have a pointer. I can review that. So we have cabinets. Each have their own parts: sides, tops, bottoms, shelves. Then they have a certain height. They have a width. Thicknesses are also the same, identified by what material. Then these numbers back here, these are very kind of cryptic looking numbers. These are millimeter dimensions for holes to be drilled later. You will see this in following photos, but this is all incorporated into this list. Here on the far right, we're having already a calculation of how much material we need. So in the end, you can program this to such an extent that it tells me that I needed 5 sheets of plywood. And, no, it wasn't. I needed only 2 sheets of beech and then I think 5 sheets of melamine or something like that. So we looked at these lists again and again and again as we were beginning to fabricate, because you cannot ever really afford to look the wrong way. It's a cumulative effect. Yes, please. This is a second list. I don't know, it's probably a little small for you to read. Now, this is all about the doors and drawers, which is a whole different world. So we distinguish between cabinets, this is the casework, and then we have a whole set of jobs just related to doors and drawers. Drawer fronts, to be more specific. And again, these are related to the numbers of the cabinets, how many, identified what it is, measurements, and so forth. So that took a long time to prepare these lists. Yes? All right, then you start cutting up material. Of of course, these sheets are quite heavy, so very much help to do this together with another person. We ended up actually increasing the efficiency to building 2 kitchens at the same time. That was how I was able to do this with him. I had asked him, hey, next time you have a job for a kitchen, can I tag along? And we'll do them together. So, because so much of it is standard dimensions, it wasn't all that difficult to distinguish between the parts for my kitchen and for his kitchen. So we just kept going on. I had a gray colored melamine, he had a white colored melamine, so we immediately knew which one is which. So to keep the piles apart. And then you need space. You need space in your shop to stack parts of different sheets of plywood. And here you see various stacks that already have in them a groove for the back panel, right here. Yeah, and I'll get to this later. This is already the beginning of the biscuit joinery. But of course you format everything to size first. Again, every piece gets a number written on it. You need to be pretty methodical. You cannot lose track of your parts. They all look the same, but they're different by a few inches here and there, so try not to mix them up as best as you can. Yes? So now this is the case joinery. It's of course not what we normally do or what I normally do in fine woodworking. This is basic plywood construction. So some of you have heard me use this at the community college, the joint of shame, the biscuit jointer. So, I think it has a place in the world for here. This is a really nice way of fabricating and producing large quantities of cases. In fine furniture making, not so much. Yeah? But now, of course, there is a new machine in the world now that questions everything, and that's the Domino by Festool. That's a game changer that has really breached both worlds now into fine woodworking, fine furniture making, and cabinet making. What you see here is a little stick that helps me lay out where I do the biscuits. So I have a little fence in the back. It always reads off the back edge of my cabinet. You can identify the back edge by the fact that it has the groove for the back panel. And then it has markings in regular intervals that I don't ever have to measure again. So it's like a story stick that helps me just for really quick layout to do the biscuits. Yes. And then I use basically the bottom of the biscuit jointer as my reference face. I use one face, the outside face of my case as a reference face, lying on the same surface, and I just go in with regular full-size number 20 biscuits. Who of you has worked with biscuits?
We've come out of the closet. We had to.
That was quite an outing. Wow. Next, please. All right. What I wasn't able to photograph because everything happened so fast and I just didn't have it together is the process of adding on an edge band of veneer on the front edge of every piece. So we basically have, and you can see this in the photo here, all these parts have already one band of beech veneer on the very front edge. And so, and by the way, you see here the joinery, the biscuit joinery, which will be reinforced by 1, 2, 3, 4 screws after it's been glued together. And that's basically your case joint. No frills, very basic. Yes, please.
Don't you experience problems getting any kind of glue to adhere to the melamine, or not?
Oh no, the glue just pops right off.
No, but that's what I'm saying. So when you put the joints together, you said glue it and screw it, but you're not relying on the glue.
No. The glue is totally working in the biscuit.
The biscuits,
and then we have screws to reinforce. And actually, I shouldn't say it pops right off. Yellow glue, even yellow glue, actually has an adhesion to melamine to some degree. Yeah.
If you could help me orient those biscuit cuts,
Yeah.
what are they attaching? What to what?
You will see later. These parts are sides, vertical sides of lower cabinets. Yeah. So you see an inside top, an inside bottom. There are 3 biscuits here. You have the back panel groove in the rear, and then you have these 3 individual rails. They're just 4 inches, 3 inches wide. You will see later these are little dividers in between drawers. Yeah, they will give the space the drawer. So the process of edge banding is what it's called when we apply a veneer edge to the front of the plywood. Of course, you can do this yourself. You can glue them on individually, but I had like 60 parts, and that's a lot of clamping and a lot of gluing. You can speed up things tremendously by just going to your local cabinet shop that makes kitchens all the time and hire them to do edge banding. And I had all my parts edge banded on a machine in less than 30 minutes. Cost me probably $200 or something, including material, and get that out of the way. And it's an edge banding machine. I wish I had photos. I'm sorry that I missed that, but everything happened so fast that I had to help doing this. It glues on the strip of veneer. The veneer, by the way, I selected extra thick, so it was like 1.5 millimeters. So what is that, like a fat 16th? And it trims it flush, and it even gives it a light bevel, an ever so light bevel on the edge when it comes out of the machine. Done. I mean, it's pretty impressive. So all my parts were edge banded. Most of them only received an edge on the front, but there were pieces, especially the upper cabinets, that get an edge banding also on the bottom edge and on the top edge. The rear obviously never gets a cover veneer, but those edges are exposed on the upper cabinets, so they also got edge banded. Yes. A question, yes.
Yeah, the beach that you chose, that's solid panels you're using, or is that also plywood?
What are you referring to specifically?
You said you bought European beach for all the exposed areas. Is that plywood?
Okay. There are exposed surfaces that are beach veneer plywood, and of course all my doors and drawer fronts
are
solid wood beach.
Okay.
Thank you for specifying. Again, more biscuit jointing. Sometimes I like to not rely on my table surface as a reference surface for biscuiting, but I actually sit on something really clean, like another piece of melamine, and that really gives me a reliable reference to biscuit. Yes, please, in the back.
Is there a particular reason why you chose to edge band as opposed to doing a face frame or something like that?
Yeah, I wanted that look of. I'm not a fan of face frame. Just I don't like the way it looks. I really like it. Looks much cleaner if my doors are covering. They're basically overlay doors. They cover the front edges. For the most part, I see between an 1/8 and 3/16 of exposed front edge. But that is a specific look I was going after. That's why I did not use a face frame. And that way you can produce in such a fast way. Building the face frame is actually a pretty involved process as well. On to the next important step. And this is sort of the big thing about the famous 32 millimeter system that some of you may have heard about. So you basically use a machine that has this is a drill that has over a dozen drill bits spinning at the same time, and you see the lever how you pull down, here, and they all go down at the same time. Next photo. And so you just place your piece on the table. You have a dedicated stop, carefully calculated where that is. You need a
a certain distance, again, from the bottom up. You always need to measure, in this case we decided, from the bottom up. And then the distance, of course, 32 millimeters, center to center to center. And you do an entire row of holes. You do one in the back, in the front, at a very specific distance from the front edge. And again, that has to happen after the edge banding. Don't do that before the edge banding. Yes, please.
Is that your machine?
That is not my personal machine, that is someone else's machine. Because I don't do that in my shop all that often. I don't do that kind of fabrication in the shop that often, so it's too much real estate.
Is that a machine that you could fairly easily get access to if you go to a cabinet shop?
Yeah. Well, many cabinet shops, actually, don't be surprised. They like the big shops that do nothing but kitchen cabinets all day long, they're open to having you come and rent for a while with a crew member. So they will never let you use machines alone. But yes, please.
Shameless plug. You can do that with the CNC router.
Ah, there you go.
It'll hit those marks exactly. So if you need the machine, come on down to Beach.
And I would assume it's just one individual hole at a time.
Yes.
So it might take a little longer.
But it's fast, but not that fast.
But a great alternative, because key is that you maintain that regularity of the 32 millimeters, that everything is aligned properly. Yes? All right. This is a whole new other group of parts. These long strips. This is a half-inch Baltic birch, and it is the material for the drawers. So, many of you have built drawers, I assume, and you take great care in cutting all the parts individually to length, and then you select some nice corner joinery, maybe even dovetails, and build this pretty little box and pay a lot of attention to it. Well, not if you make 20 drawers. So between his kitchen and my kitchen, we had a lot. And so what you do is, again, in the spirit of efficiency and production mode, you streamline the process. So these are 3 different heights. Let me see. This 1, 2, 3 different widths. So we prepared multiple strips of these standard widths, which are our 3 different drawer heights, at long strips, as long as the sheet of plywood was. And they get a, next please, they get already the groove for the bottom, while they are still long strips. Yeah. Yes, please.
What thickness are you using on the plywood?
Half-inch. Half-inch, or actually no, this could be 5/8 actually. Sorry.
What was the question?
How thick is the plywood for the drawers? You can do anything between half-inch, 5/8. We selected 5/8, I remember now, because of the hardware we were using later on. So we even lacquered these as long strips. Finished. Done.
You can buy that.
You can buy it at that stage? Sure. Possibly. Why not?
Yeah.
By the way, you can approach this whole thing in a completely different angle. You, as a woodworker, you can say, you know what, melamine, biscuits, really? Why don't I just sub that out and have someone else make it? There's a company in Colorado called Cap Parts. You need to prepare the cut list. Really, you need to be really spot on with your dimensions. And they fabricate all these parts, either in melamine or in a veneered plywood. They prepare the joinery. I don't think they use biscuits. They have a different kind of joint. But it's all ready, and you get a pallet shipped to your home or your shop, and then you assemble the cabinet parts. And it's actually, considering what you create in value as a whole kitchen, it's not that big of an investment. So you can skip that whole part and focus on building doors and drawers and other things for the kitchen. So anyway, pre-lacquered already, next. Then we started cutting them to length in the individual strips. Now is the time to really pay attention to the quality of your saw blade. It's lacquered, it's finished, no tear out, please. Handle the parts carefully, which is a little annoying that you have to be so mindful. Again, there are only drawers in a kitchen. So it's a different quality standard in terms of the refinement of surfaces. You know, you have to, or I should say, I had to let go of some preconceived expectations there. And but the precision, nevertheless, in the cuts and in your joinery still has to be there.
So did you, when you went to lacquering, which is a whole different thing where you got to have some spray booth or something, do you put a vinyl sealer down first and then lacquer two coats?
Yeah, it's always two coats. There's a sealer coat, a light sanding in between, and then a top coat.
Got it.
And that should be enough. Yes. All right. This is a spindle shaper now, and it's prepared for the corner, the case joinery of the drawer box. No time for dovetails. No time for drilling holes and screwing and whatnot. We just have one router bit, the beauty of it, one shaper bit, and the beauty of it is that you can route both parts for an interlocking corner joint. I think I have a close-up photo. There. So it creates a profile, and if you orient the parts in the proper way, either front and side, you create an interlocking corner joint with a flush corner. Nothing is sticking out. Takes a little time to adjust the height of the bit. Again, see how if you go back 2 pictures, please. This is basically a false fence that we attached for minimal tear out. Again, I pointed out the pieces are so vulnerable now. You want to prevent the tear out, so this creates backing. It's zero clearance. There's no gap between cutter and fence opening, and so we ended up with clean enough joints. Yes, please.
You make some extra parts as you go along?
No, we didn't make extra parts, but we certainly had plenty of test corners on random pieces of our 5/8 material until we got the alignment of the joint just right. It took a few tries to get it right, because again, every setup that you do on the machine gets multiplied so many times, and you really don't want to correct. So on one hand, you are doing sort of production fabrication, but at the same time you're actually more precise because you take better care in setting up your machine. It's an interesting phenomenon that happens when you do multiples, many multiples of one procedure. There was a second question, yes?
That was my question.
You had the same
Yes.
in the back?
I was wondering whether it's possible to execute that joinery with a high-powered router. Do they make a similar bid for routers?
Yes, you can. Yeah. I don't have it, but I'm pretty sure you can.
So once you locked it in, everything was nailed after that? Whether the first piece and last piece were exactly the same?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. We ended up having a couple of tear out issues, but after you spend the time setting up the machine, you can pretty much count on a consistent fit. And it's an interesting profile that you see here, creating sort of legitimate glue surface for a plywood type glue up, and of course infinitely faster than any other case joinery you can think of.
Do you have to clean the blades at all, your cutters?
We didn't, no.
I mean, you're dealing with a finished product with chemicals on it.
No, well, we were only routing the edges. The faces were sprayed.
Oh.
We didn't really put a lot of finish on the edges. Okay, this is a back part of a drawer box already with the routed corner joint here, you see the color difference between finished and unfinished. And you also see a notch cut out of a certain size. It goes as high as where the drawer bottom begins, and it has a very distinct width. And that is only done on the rear of the drawer parts. And that has something to do with the hardware we selected for the drawers, the drawer slides. What we chose was what's called a self-closing undermount drawer slide. I'm sure that's part of your sale today. Very sweet. Do you guys have you had exposure to those? Have you worked with those? Again, what we teach in our program in fine furniture making, the way I've learned it, there are very refined ways of how you can create a drawer, a beautifully crafted drawer in wood on wood mechanics, make it slide in a certain way. There's a great art in it and pride in how you accomplish that and make a drawer fit really well. In the kitchen, different world. We resort to the heavy-duty metal slides. They have been designed for that purpose. They can take heavy loads. We have very low friction. They're reliable. They're mounted and applied very fast, again, in the spirit of efficiency. The much more appropriate choice for kitchens that we have now available. They require, the undermount drawer slides require that your back pieces have a notch cut out so the hardware can exit through the rear of the drawer. Yes, please. These are the fronts of the drawers, and I pre-drilled multiple holes. These are to later attach our false drawer fronts. So we distinguish between just the regular drawer box, and then we attach a beechwood drawer face with screws. We don't glue because everything was lacquered anyways, but it doesn't really have to be glued. And it's actually nice to have the option to, I'll get to that later, that you screw on the false front because you can make corrections to make it look just the way you want it in the clearances that you're after. So you see the drawer bottom groove, and 1, 2, and then 3, 4 on the other end, holes to receive.
Use a jig for those two. A jig for those.
I actually drilled with stop blocks on the drill press, and always, whatever procedure I do, I have a pile next to me. So I just go on stop blocks, always the same procedure. Certain drill bit. Again, this is all part of the planning. And then the execution is actually not that long to build all this. Next, please. And then we're ready to glue up drawer boxes. You see the cutouts here in the back for the drawer hardware. Now I decided to use the Baltic birch ply. For those of you who know this material, it has an edge that shows the multiple layers of veneer that get cross-laminated to create the plywood. And it's actually a rather attractive look, in my opinion. Very modern, kind of industrial. So I didn't add a cover veneer of birch or maple or something to hide that edge. But you can't see it in this photo, but this is the original edge that you see of the Baltic birch. And I think it's actually very nice looking. You can sand it, you can make it look quite pretty. Yes.
You count on the bottom of the drawer to have it absolutely square.
No. That bottom is melamine. It does not get glued in. Well, we actually put a little glue in there, but into the groove. But I don't use the bottom to square up my top. I do that by aligning my clamps. common challenge, maybe familiar challenge, gluing up a box squarely. Yeah, it's always a little thing. These Bessie clamps have a very good alignment. That these surfaces here are flat and straight and quite parallel to each other. These red components, unlike a regular bar clamp or Z clamp. And they really help you quite a bit in getting things square. They actually only like to glue up squarely. You cannot even angle them deliberately, even if you wanted them. They don't really like that. Other clamps are more cooperative that way. But that might be another demonstration worth doing. But you can actually manipulate the squareness of this glue up just by how you attach the clamps. So always be aware of that it is not your joint's fault. It's your clamp's fault. So you can, if I move this clamp, this upper unit, half an inch to the left, leave this one in place, and then move this one half an inch to the left, I can make a parallelogram out of this box. Also, I can make it square if it wasn't square before. Yeah, by just deliberately changing the position of the clamp. So we always be mindful that's a common skill to have in the woodshop. Yes.
Bessie has some small clamps now that just clamp them down and it's square. They take two boards and it's square. And for small drawers, those things are slick. It's just so easy.
I'm not familiar with them. Yes, please.
Do you leave the edge of the top edge of the drawer unfinished, or you go back and finish that later?
That was like after I glued them up. I gave them a quick sand, a light sanding to make them nice and flush, and then I gave them just a rubbed on finish, like a polyurethane or something that I can rub on. Didn't have to spray.
How thick is the drawer bottom?
The drawer bottom is, I'm sorry, I'll get to you. Drawer bottom is 1/4 inch millimeter. Yes.
When this is put together and squared, you then put a screw in to each corner to fix it, or is it just the glue that's on it?
It's just the glue. Okay. Just the glue.
And it needs to stay in the clamp for how long?
Well, if I use Type Bond original, I'm a bit conservative. I like to leave it clamped for an hour. Other people are much faster and trusted, even as short as 30 minutes. But if you have the time, if you have the space, if you have the number of clamps, again, we glued up almost 20 drawers. So you have to keep going. You run out of clamps eventually.
I've seen a method used by the cabinet maker right now where they put these into a jig where there's a right angle that absolutely guarantees it, and put it in to square it, but then they use it with glue, and then they use a pin nail to hold it while so they can do it production. So have you tried that?
Then they probably don't have to leave it clamped up so long.
They don't clamp. It's in a square with a wedge.
Oh, yeah. That's even faster. Yeah, that's even faster. Yeah. No, you learn by experience, like what you can get away with when you are set up for that kind of production on an ongoing basis. For me, a kitchen job is still a novelty. I mean, not a novelty. It's out of the ordinary. Yeah. So all the drawers are glued up now. Yes. Then I sat down and made myself an old-fashioned drawing, pencil and paper, for all my doors. These are all my doors, from basically all the upper cabinets from left to right as they wrap around the corner. So this is actually a 90-degree cabinet situation. All these doors side by side, and these are the lower doors for the lower cabinets. The stove is actually in between here
So I wasn't interested in a scale drawing of my kitchen. I just wanted my doors. And of course, the doors have a certain relationship to the cases. I mentioned earlier, these are overlay doors, and they have certain tolerances in relation to the outside dimension of my case. And so they're set back a little bit. I don't aim for flush. Again, difference between fine furniture making, kitchen making. Like in a fine cabinet, I would have maybe liked to have my door perfectly flush with the outside of my case. That's a very clean look. But that's pretty tricky to accomplish. If you want something perfectly flush, you better have it really flush. If it's off by a 32nd, it looks wrong. So to pull that off is a little tricky, and to pull that off 14 times is even more difficult. So instead you say, well, I just go in 1/8 of an inch. Also, the gap between the doors, our clearance, is at least 1/8 of an inch. I do not recommend anything less than that. In fine furniture making, I go for a 32nd between two doors that meet. That's good craftsmanship. But in the kitchen, you cannot pull that off. It's there are too many variables when it comes to installation time. You cannot count on one individual cabinet having one individual door. All these cabinets are going to be screwed together, and you have to deal with irregularities of floor and wall and whatnot, and you just can't have that kind of tightness. So you need to be at least, I would say, 1/8 of an inch apart in between doors and drawers that meet. And if you can, if you can maybe enlarge on that screen, it's a very faint drawing, but I want you to see how the width of the upper door, of the upper rail, is the same as the vertical stile. I'm talking design now. The width of the lower rail is wider. Can you see that? The width of the floor rail is even wider yet. So it creates a sense of groundedness in your design, especially on the lower doors, because we are standing up here, looking down, and the distortion of that angle would make these lower rails appear really skinny if they were the same width as the upper rail. So we make them deliberately wider in the design, and it has a more harmonious look.
How much wider?
I believe, next photo. Yay, another list. So this is my cut list, and how much wider, okay, we can see the difference. 54 millimeters was the regular style and the upper rail, 63, so 63 is it 69? No, 63 millimeters is the lower rail of the upper cabinets, and 70 millimeters is the lower rail of the bottom cabinets.
7.
I will bring that up in a second. Yes, please.
Well, I was curious about whether there's a process for arriving at that difference, if it's there's some rule of thumb mathematics, or if it's mocking up and eyeballing it.
Yeah, no, I cannot offer you a formula, but because it is a bit of a personal decision to what degree you want to enhance that effect. If my upper rail is 2 inches, I want to be maybe 2 3/4, 2.5, yeah, for the lower rail. In that proportion, maybe. It's something that I have found appealing over time, but you can decide that on your own. Yes, please.
Do you use that same approach for fine furniture?
Yes. Yes. So before we take a break, I just want to see that point out that the doors and the drawers are an opportunity for you to shine in your kitchen. Don't waste your time on your casework. Just keep that as basic as you can. your concern is that it doesn't fall apart, that it stays square, and and that you can clean it. But really show off your skills in the doors and drawers and the faces. That's where you can make a kitchen a real valuable asset to your home.
When I was looking to have a cabinet maker make a set of cabinets, and I knew I wanted to go to the soft close drawer system. They in this particular case they did all
finger joints.
Finger joints, and he said that for that particular closing system, you needed the strength that finger joints provided because there was more torquing on it. And he said a typical tacky drawer that you just slap together, would distort and not withstand that constant use. Now your joinery, you do it a little different way, but he said there's just more. I don't know. He just felt.
No, I'm all for that. I mean, finger joints, yay, that's great. That's going to live forever. I don't know. I mean, I trust the ones that we made.
Yeah.
But can't go wrong with finger joints.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, rather than just putting them together.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that would be the easiest, but it probably would.
No, you need something
You
else.
you accomplished it a different way, but that's important.
It's important. So break time?
Yes.
Okay.
I had one.
Raffle time.
One question?
Yeah, with the shaper bit, did you have one board vertical for one cut and then one board laying down?
Exactly. I forgot to point that out.
Yeah.
Yes. That is the magic of that bit, that you can use it for both parts. You orient one on the end grain and one on upright and one lying flat.
Yeah.
What's the name of that artist?
One thing I didn't mention earlier, I already covered building the drawers, right? So the hardware that I selected, the undermount self-closing slide, actually has certain requirements in the design of the drawer. So you, unlike a side-mounted slide, which some of you might be familiar with, they are for the most part half an inch thick, so you just have an easy calculation. I need half an inch to the left, a half an inch to the right, and then I can build any box I want. And I just attach them to the outside of the box. That is not the case with an undermount slide. You actually have sort of a limited range of dimensions that you want to work with. And that includes also the depth of the drawer. Yeah? Because these slides come in increments of either 14, 16, 18, 20 inches, or there are other manufacturers that work in odd numbers, 15, 17, 19 inches. So that basically describes the outside dimension of your depth of your box. The width, of course, is depending on your case design. But even so, for example, you saw the photo of my drawer parts with the groove for the bottom. That location of that bottom was carefully determined according to the hardware. And you need to inform yourself about those requirements, and usually they come with printed instructions and drawings that indicate how high does the drawer bottom have to be, because it is a function of the fact that all that hardware has to be underneath somewhere the drawer and still allow the drawer to move in and out. So the height of the drawer bottom is key. Also, the thickness of your sides cannot be more than 5/8. That's sort of a limitation of those undermount slides. Again, there's a relationship to the hardware where it grabs the drawer box from below. And just a heads up that you need to be aware of that. A couple of questions. Linda in the back.
Do you have any recommendation? I was just looking in the catalog and trying to find some lightweight vanity drawers that are fairly small, and I think they should be side mounted, but Bloom doesn't show any side mounted sliders, so what would you do in that case?
So what slides to recommend for a relatively small drawer in a vanity? Can you tell me how deep it is?
Not deep, it's about only 15 inches.
15. Well, you should be able to find side mounting slides for that.
Do you have any
Mm, no, I'm actually not that. Hettich is a good one. TJ Hardware carries Hettich. Bloom is fine, but you said you couldn't find it at Bloom?
I see it in the catalog here. So
Huh.
I didn't know if they don't make side-mounted ones. I like Bloom a lot. I use the underground all the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't see them showing them side-mounted ones.
That's surprising. I mean, 15 inches should be plenty long. I've seen slides as short as 12, side mounted. The undermount, I don't think you can get that short. Yes, please.
The undermount, the self-closing drawers slides that we have are undermount. The nice thing about it is they don't take any width for drawers where the width is critical. I mean, typical drawers with side mount, you lose a full inch in width.
That's right.
And the undermount, you could have it almost flush.
Well, but even there is a certain gap that has to be accommodated. But you're right, on the undermount slide, the sideways gap is significantly smaller than the gap that a side-mounted slide would require. Was there another question? Yes?
On your undermounts, how do you mount to the back? Do you have to buy that little extra little piece to mount?
No, I don't. I ignore that. I might have limited photos to explain it to you, but what I just wanted to touch now is that be aware, if you choose the undermount slide, that you need to allow these requirements in the dimensions. You don't just design a drawer and think, oh, I'll just attach the runner later. You literally design from the inside out. You design the drawer box and then basically the case following that. Just as a
And not thicker than 5/8 is
not, in my experience, not thicker than 5/8. So now I'm going into door production, and this is my pile of beech, solid European beech that I rough milled. I bought 4-quarter beech, found a wonderful resource in Denver, great price. Shipping was actually surprisingly cheap, and so try to do my best. And as I pointed out earlier, with the doors and the drawer faces, this is the time for you to really get creative. To a degree. I mean, it depends on how many doors you have to build. Don't kill yourself, but this is where you can really make the kitchen stand out and look unique. And so I did that, first of all, by the choice of material. I dare you to show me another kitchen in European beech around here. So that's quite unusual. So rough milling, 4-square stock. You see how I have my cut list to the left. Each part has a number, and I like to label my parts on the end grain because that way that is the last surface to be cut in my milling sequence, so I don't lose track of my numbers. Don't put a number on the face because it's going to disappear the moment you joint and thickness plane it. And on the edges, same problem, but on the ends you can hang on to it until the very end, so it helps you keeping track of your parts. Those are my please, my rough milled parts. Oh, can you go back, please? And to the left, you see solid white planks that will be used for panels. My lower doors will have a solid wood panel, and my upper doors will have frosted glass. And so it's a different way of making the door. Good, next. Now they're milled and 4-squared. Stiles to the right, rails to the left. Next, please. And I'm beginning to arrange them in how I want to have rails and stiles relate to each other. You can go as far, if you are so inclined, when you have twin doors, I mean pairs of doors, which is very common in kitchen cabinetry, that you have pairs of doors, that you have the rails coming out of the same piece of wood, for continuing grain. Like I said, opportunities to go into more the world of fine furniture making and do things that a commercial cabinet shop would never think about doing. But it only takes you a few minutes in the shop to be mindful about your material selection, and you can enhance the quality of your cabinetry that way. These two pieces side by side could technically come out of the same piece of wood. Yeah, it's a very attractive look when you think about it, like in fine furniture making.
Real close.
Then you see my little triangle here, marking left, up, right, low. They have numbers now. These are now milled to final thickness and final width, final length, everything ready for joinery. Yes, please. So I choose a bridle joint for my standard corner joint for the door frames. And I have, like I said, I have upper doors with glass and lower doors with solid wood panel. That means the lower doors have a panel that is trapped in a groove on all four sides. It's a floating panel, so it can shrink and expand with changing humidity. The upper doors will get a rabbet to receive a panel of glass, and then I will mount the glass with what's called glass stops, so basically little sticks of wood cut to size that hold the glass firmly into the frame, but I can remove them. They're screwed in case my glass ever breaks and I can replace it. So I don't ever want to trap the glass in there, then the door is basically shot if I have glass damage. And the bridle joint for the lower doors is different than the bridle joint on the upper doors, and you will see in a short while. So here I have the tenon jig, and I'm taking out the mortise in my stiles. I have the vertical pieces of the frames going through visually once the frame is glued up. And so that means they receive the mortise in the bridle joint. And for those of you who are familiar with the tenon jig, this is, I believe, the Delta tenon jig. It's a very efficient little tool. It takes a while to set it up. Be very patient. When you set it up, make sure everything is square, that the blade is square to the table, the fence is square to the table. Of course, my end grain cut is a good square end, and that way you get beautiful consistency. I'm doing dozens of bridle joints now, so I don't want to futz around with fitting a tenon. Good grief. So they have to come out of the table so ready to be glued up. That's my goal. I use a saw blade that has a flat bottom tooth, so I can create a nice, crisp bottom end grain of my tenon. Many saw blades have angled teeth, and they create a little V pattern if you do that. Not so great. So if you have a carbide tip blade that has flat tooth, most rib blades are like that. Yes?
You put a backer on that? Is there a tear out problem?
Yeah, you actually see, if you close it, there's a piece of wood right
there
here.
it is. Okay.
You see that?
Yeah.
That's my backing. Thanks for pointing that out. That, of course, is necessary to prevent tear out. I'm using a rib blade, and it's not really, it's more prone to tearing out that way. So backing takes care of the problem. Yes, please.
Are you cutting the mortise with 2 passes or some other number?
I'm cutting the mortise actually with multiple passes, more than 2. The blade is obviously only 1/8 of an inch thick. My material is 19 millimeters, which is roughly 3/4. So I do, my layout is equal thirds. You do the math. The mortise is obviously more than 1/8 of an inch, so it takes more than a couple of passes. I even go a step further. I do a setup where I do one pass that is not even precise yet. It's away from my markings, and I just hog out most of the waste. And I have found that if I remove most of the waste material first on all of them, and then I go back and I set my fence now to the precise setting, that now the blade only has to remove maybe as little as a 32nd of an inch. It's more consistent, it's more precise. It doesn't have to work very hard. It's just shaving off a little bit. It's not prone to vibrating because I just moved a little too fast. Yeah, I've had good luck with that.
you set it so that in order to do the two final passes, you just have to flip it over so it's the same?
I flip it.
Absolutely
I
same.
flip my piece around because my layout of my joint is a symmetrical one. That means the mortise is centered in the thickness of my frame parts, and so is the tenon. The tenon is centered in the thickness. That allows me to flip things around, and I have fewer settings. Next, please. So next is cutting the shoulders for the tenons. Obviously, we're cutting mortises first. In joinery in general, I like to go by that rule that I create the cavity first and then I fill it with something. It's easier to adjust, or my micro adjustment for the good fit is easier that way. So now we do the cross cut with the stop block to the left, the green stop block. Actually, a nice little habit for your shop. If you work with wooden stop blocks and maybe clamp calls or something, they look like random pieces of scrap wood, and if you don't store them properly, they might end up in the garbage. I paint mine green, and I always know, oh, these are actually tools. Yeah, so don't throw them away. You know.
Good idea.
Okay, I want you to see that I did something different here. I have two cross cuts. The blade height obviously determines the size of the shoulder. The stop block decides the distance. But I have them offset at two different places. And that is characteristic for the bridle joint that will later on receive a rabbet. Yeah, my upper doors that get the glass in there, I can create the rabbet on the table saw completely. I don't have to build a frame and then route a rabbet. I actually do it as part of my joinery. So just pay attention. The difference of this, the distance, is the width of my rabbet. Yeah. Next, please. And this will make more sense with further photos. Again, in the spirit of making life easy for my tenon jig, I actually go quickly to my bandsaw. I'm making tenons now, and I cut off cheeks, but I'm staying away from my pencil line. A tenon cut on the bandsaw is not a very beautiful thing. It could be rather wobbly and irregular in thickness. But this is only for the purpose of removing most of my waste. So when I go back to the tenon jig, for the final fit, just a light shaving of the table saw of a 32nd of an inch. It takes me only minutes to do this on the bandsaw because it's not really a precision job. Okay, so now I created mortise and tenons, but because of the offset of my shoulders, you can see how I'm not able to assemble the frame. It doesn't go in all the way. One of the shoulders hits earlier than the second shoulder. And that's on purpose. I just wanted you to see the effect. And I also realized it's upside down. Doesn't matter. Next. So now, this is a close-up. So this is as close as I can get this joint together at this point. Because the one shoulder that's in the rear keeps the other shoulder from going home. Next. But once I remove the rabbet, again, this is the view from the other side. I haven't done the rabbet yet. But now the key is I want to do the rabbet on the table saw and be able to go all the way through from front to back on every piece. Some of you may have built frames with a glass rabbet where you have to do a stop cut because you don't want to damage the joint. You don't want to show holes in the joint coming out the other end. Next, please. Now, after I cut the rabbet, this happens. So now, I actually, what you see here, from here to here to here is my rabbet. And by cutting that, all of a sudden the pieces come together all the way. And both pieces get the same rabbet. It might sound a little confusing now, because I don't have a diagram to show you the other version, but
it avoids having to do a stop cut, routing only to a certain point. I wanted to, you basically avoid getting a hole here, a rectangular hole exiting, going through.
Do you have a picture of it flipped over?
Pardon?
Do you have a picture of it flipped over?
I don't think I do. No, I don't. Yeah. So it's a way to utilize the bridle joint, anticipating the making of a rabbit, and it's very quick. It's a nice, effective way of creating the rabbit, and it doesn't look bad either. All right, next. So this is I'm gluing up the solid wood panels now for my lower doors. I actually made them practically as thick as my frame. Yeah. Next.
No biscuits, just glue.
Just glue. I had enough biscuits. Yes, please.
How do you keep the wood from bowing when you clamp it? Can you go back
Right.
when you have it in the
Okay, now look what I did with my clamps.
Is it the over-under?
One's under.
Over, under, and on the ends, I come from the end. It's neither over nor under. So a pipe clamp, unfortunately, has this effect that when we come from the top, it tends to pull up on the ends. Yeah. Now this one pulls down now on the ends. This one comes from the side, so it's supposed to do nothing, really. So this is sort of a typical glue up, yeah, for me, where I play with positioning the clamps either above or below to neutralize that cupping effect that the pipe clamp tends to have. But you can always get rid of it by sometimes just by moving this up 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, that could be all it takes to make it bow the other way, or cup the other way.
You don't use calls.
No, it takes too long.
Do you check it with a straight edge?
Of course.
Okay.
My frame is square right there, my straight edge, and check for is this flat across. And that's crucial for a panel this thick, because I have to get it into my frame. So a thin panel that's only 3/8 of an inch thick, if that cups, I'm not concerned because my frame will make it flat. It'll be trapped in the groove. But for something that's substantial, I want to make an effort of gluing up straight. But you can accomplish all that just with the positioning of your clamps. If you want to work with cawls, fine, but it's not really necessary. You should be able to get it all just by positioning the clamps.
And do you do a spring joint in between the edges?
A what?
A spring joint between the edges?
No, this is just a square jointed edge. That's good enough for that. Yes, please.
How do you keep from ending up with a twist on a large panel like that?
After I'm done with the glue up, I have 2 cawls, like a stand, 2 pieces of plywood that make a T, and I have 2 of those, and I place my piece on there, and they're the same height, and if it wobbles, I have a twist, and then I have to do something about it, and if it doesn't, then it lies flat on those 2 reference rails. Good, now they're cut to size, and I'm beginning with preparing for the joint. So I'm cutting the shoulders first, a certain distance. Then in a different position, I cut the thickness of the tongue. In this case, I have a double-sided tongue, so I basically cut a rabbit on 2 sides. So the panel is centered within the frame. In that way, we basically create a flush surface. Outside of frame equals outside of panel on both inside and outside. Also note here, a little dark hidden is my featherboard that receives it after the blade to maintain the consistency of my tongue thickness. The tongue thickness is crucial, it wants to be the same because my groove is all the same. I actually have no photo of cutting the groove, I don't believe I have, in the frame, but that's pretty simple. So then this is your typical frame glue up. My floating panel is contained within the frame. It's trapped on all 4 sides.
I tried to find some nice flat sawn figure that has some character to it. Because it is trapped within a frame, I don't have to be worried too much about cupping. That's the whole beauty of this construction method. I use straight grained wood for my frame material, stiles and rails. You want to use either quarter sawn or rift sawn for those, but in the panel you can go crazy. You can have flat sawn, wild figure to show off the beauty of the wood. Question?
On your panel cuts for the tongues, is there any reason why you did it that way vertically rather than with a dado blade? Any motivation there?
This question comes up regularly in class. So when we cut rabbits to create a tongue, you have to think in terms. It's a little difficult without photos now, but it has something to do with creating the consistency of my tongue's thickness. If I have my piece lying flat down, this is what you're proposing, right? It's flat down on the table saw, and I have a dado taking out from below. I don't have a dependable reference face. Actually, to be honest, because it's double-sided, that method could have worked. If it's a one-sided tongue, a one-sided rabbit, if you only cut a rabbit on one side to create the tongue, then I prefer this method, so I took it over out of habit. But you're actually correct. In this, with a rabbit from both sides, I could have used the dado stack as well. It has something to do with the reference faces. A little difficult to explain without photos, but this is my preferred method when I do a one-sided rabbit to create my tongue. So this is my glue up. Obviously I have a regular spacing, a gap that allows for wood movement here on the sides, at least 1/8 of an inch, so it doesn't look like a mistake. If you go too tight with your gaps, not only do you risk problems with wood movement, but also it may look like, why is it not tight? Why is it not closed? It looks like a mistake, but when you do a deliberate gap, 1/8, 3/16, it looks like a design detail. And because it's a bridle joint, I also have pressure in this dimension, and I commit to these little clamps only after I made sure that the joint is seated. So I had long clamps to bring the joint home in both this dimension and this direction. I had clamps that push the joints all the way, that the shoulders close. Then I double check for square. Is the frame square? With measuring the two diagonals. If the diagonals are identical, I know I have a square frame. And only then do I commit to pressure in this direction to guarantee the glue bond between tenon and mortise.
How do you assure that the floating panel is not going to skew at all?
I use little shims and tell it where to go. In this little groove, I place tiny little shims, dimension to whatever gap I'm aiming for, and then it basically tells the panel to go center. Thank you very much. And then when the glue,
those are temporary.
Those are only temporary. When I'm done on the inside of the door, on the top rail and the bottom rail, imagine this is the inside of the door now, I make a little hole, 1/8 of an inch, in the center, very close to the groove, and I hit the tongue. I drill through the tongue, and I drill a little further, but I do not come out on the outside. Now I take a little skewer, a little 1/8-inch dowel, and pin it, glue it. Now it's located in position, and it can shrink and expand from the left and the right, but it's trapped in location. Make sense?
That's after you center the panel.
Of course, it has to be in the position I want it. Yes, please.
I was curious about whether you, it seems as though you're cutting the tongues so that they don't bottom out in the grooves, or you cut them precisely to the same dimension as the depth of the groove, or do you leave a little gap? And how large is the gap?
Okay, how deep do I make the tongue in relationship to the groove? I leave about 1/16 of an inch gap between the bottom of the groove and the outside edge of my tongue. So that allows my panel to grow in case I move to Seattle with it or something, and then, but not too much because I don't want it to slip out when it shrinks too much. Yes, please.
Your panel and frame here, they look finished. Are they already finished at this point?
No.
No.
No, they're just sanded.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Christoph, did you highlight the tongue on the panel?
What do you mean by highlight?
Well, I mean, it seems to be very dark there. Is that just an optical illusion, or is it? I mean, it looks almost like.
Oh, that's that's no. The question was if I did something to the color of the tongue because it looks so dark. That's basically the shadow. The groove is so small that there's no light there, and it shows up as a strong shadow line, which makes actually for a nice design detail to outline the shape of my panel. I did, however, pre-finish my rabbet before I glued up, because if the panel ever shrinks, it could show unfinished tongue later down the road. Yes.
Is there a slide bevel or a chamfer on the stiles, rails of the panel? Or is that just a straight 90?
The outside
The,
what part are you referring
I'm looking at the inside by the panel, and the frame goes around it.
All 90 degrees. I kept it really crisp. There's no detailing, no profiling of any sorts, beveling. Of course, endless opportunities here between panel and door frame to create more detailing. In my design, I wanted to keep it really crisp and clean. Yes?
But I thought when I was up at college, I thought when they were bringing the panel together with the rails and frames, styles, they encouraged us to use those little spacer balls or whatever they're called.
Space balls.
Space balls, or whatever they're called. You don't.
No, well, did you all hear the question?
No.
So the use of Spaceballs, it's a product, it's a brand name, right? Little flexible, rubbery type thingies that you put into the groove, and it basically the job is to center the panel, and if it wants to grow, those little doodads just compress and allow that to happen, and it's like an automatic centering. Yeah. No, I didn't do that. I used my little pins. So that's the same job. It's just about for centering the panel, so it doesn't
go one way.
Go only one way. Yeah. As it shrinks, or maybe it just gets pushed there somehow, depending on how tight your groove is. If your groove is really loose, you need to worry about this. How do you center? Because otherwise, gravity and whatnot will make this look very uneven, this groove. Yes?
I was going to ask whether the width of your groove and the width of your fusion are the same. Or you make it a little bit smaller.
Okay, let's be more specific. Are you talking about the thickness of my tongue?
Yes.
In relation to the width of the groove?
Yes.
They're pretty much snug. They're snug. I always do the rattle test. I always tell my students, like, if you tap this panel, you don't want to hear a vibrating rattle. It needs to go thump. Yeah, and so you want a snug fit, not so tight that you have to pound it in. But a good test is I make my I have my groove. I cut the groove first, obviously, and then I cut the tongue to fit. I put one rail piece in. I put the tongue into one rail, and then I hold it. And if it falls out, it's too loose. Yeah. But if it stays by friction, we're good to go. Please. All right. Now we're doing a little detailing, little creative touch to my doors. You can't see it quite yet, but I'm
This is the outside face of my door. It's already glued up. I've made a router template that has a fence. This is a piece of fence that runs the entire length of this. Oh no, I'm sorry, you can't see the fence. The fence is underneath here. No, the fence is here. What am I saying? The picture's weird from here. No, this is the fence, of course, right here. You see that piece of wood? Screwed and glued to my template. Then I made this opening here so I can route a tiny little cavity into my outside face of my frame. I have a router here with a guide bushing, a small 1/4 inch straight bit that sticks out, not very much. And the guide bushing will read the parameter of this shape, and it will create a tiny little mortise from the inside of the door, which is 1/2 of a lap joint. You will see more later. Okay. Then these are the glass stops. These sticks of wood, they have a certain profile, and these two surfaces are square to each other. Oh no, you can't really see it very well. This is a bit distorted. Anyway, I needed to drill holes into this flat area here. This is actually an angled surface that I cut, and it is to make it possible for me to put a little screw in to attach my glass stop into the frame. You don't want that hole to be parallel to the frame because your screwdriver will damage the glass. So you want to come in like this at a slight angle. So you need to prepare an angled surface. And then in order to drill holes perpendicular to this, I had to build this little cradle to receive the stick. So I pre-drilled holes that will receive the screws later. Next, please. Right here in action. Next. This is now a complete door frame with the inside of the door, and with my 4 glass sticks, and you can go back and forth to the next photo a couple of times. Here's a detail. We fit these in with a miter. Here's my Here's my angled surface for the screws. It's slightly angled. It's not plumb. And here's the rabbet for the glass. So here's the gap that will receive the glass. 1/4 inch. No, 3/16. Right here. So it's a little tedious, to prepare a door frame for glass. A lot of little steps, but well worth the effort because it's a nice detail. And again, these are removable. This is a nice snug miter. And then the next photo, you see how I actually created a little detail where I needed that mortise for a lap joint. Yeah, so this is an opportunity for a design that is not too labor intensive, but still for a lot of character for the design of the doors. Notice how this cross is flush to each other here in the cross, which is a regular half lap. And here, it's actually a little proud. So basically to create a little texture and shadows as you look over the outside of your door. So these are all now glued up with that little cross detail, and it will all make more sense when you see the installation completed. Next. This is now finishing everything, lacquering. We're getting ready for install. All the doors are glued up and they get lacquered. These are panels that are part of the installation. Remember, I pointed out in the original drawing that there are panels that are visible, that have beach veneer, that are not melamine. So all these have to be lacquered now. These are all exposed show faces. Yes? Here is the famous hinge. Notice in one of the pictures earlier I had pieces of blue masking tape. That helps me to
remind me, okay, this is a left door, this is a right door. Instead of calling it left and right, I say, there goes the hole, yeah, where the blue tape is. So I don't have to think too much when I'm actually working on the drill press. I want to be absolutely clear with myself so there's no mistake. In the 32 millimeter system, again, the diameter of this hole is crucial to receive our, what are they called again?
Your cup hinge.
Yes, the cup hinge. This distance from the outside to the beginning of the hole is crucial for whatever style hinge you selected. In my case, it's like 2.5 millimeters, right there, that distance. Always the same. The position from top to center is determined by the chain of holes that I showed you earlier. We're always talking in multiples of the 32 millimeters, yeah, these distances. So these are standard distances, and if my door, so sometimes that could mean that it could actually be slightly different from a different case because the holes are in a different location. So we always have to go back to that first cut list that I showed you that had these mythical numbers there. That told me drill for hinge there at this number. Yes, please.
But because you've got a lap joint there, are you penetrating that lap because you drill that down?
This is not a lap joint, this is a bridle joint.
I mean, bridle. I meant a bridle. Don't you have a tongue coming in there?
A little bit. I don't care.
Yeah. Okay.
You never see it.
Yeah.
I did cut into it a little bit. So I stole a little bit of glue surface, but I'm not concerned. The bridle joint has so much glue surface, so it can spare a little. Again, we're looking at the inside of the door. For good measure, right. Yeah. So I really remember this is a right door, this is a left door. Time to glue up the cases. Yeah. For the actual cabinet cases now, we have glued those up. You see the row of holes here. Now you might think this is actually a horizontal cabinet. Yeah, it's standing upside, turned 90 degrees. A cabinet this low doesn't get a shelf. You know, why would I need shelf pin holes there, right? But these are not for shelf pins. These are all related to the hinges, and so what you basically do is you drill holes on all the parts, no matter what they get. If they get a door, if they get a drawer, who cares? If they get a shelf, you can use them as shelf pin holes, fine. But they have other jobs as well. So you don't even distinguish. They all get the same treatment. All the vertical parts get the same treatment. Yes, please. All right. I brought one of these here. If you can actually film this here. It's a little dark. This one. This is the foot of the lower cabinet. And you start first by attaching the, oh, I didn't bring the part. This is the foot end. Sorry, what you see on the photo receives this. Yeah? I didn't bring the base part. So you notice how I positioned the feet, or just for you to understand, I did not build a pedestal for my lower cabinets. This is a different design. You can build a pedestal, make it nice and level on your floor, and then you put your boxes on top of it with a bit of overhang in the front. Yeah, that's a common method. I decided to go the different route. All my lower cabinets are standing on feet, and they are adjustable. You can.
Okay, wait a minute.
You can. There's a thread here, and so you can change the actual height of your foot, which makes it beautiful to make it plumb, level, you know, to make up for irregularities in the floor, which is much easier than building a pedestal and making it nice and level on the floor. Yes?
What kind of load capacity does that have?
Oh, I can't tell you numbers, but all I need is 5 feet. 5 of those. Yeah. They are distributed by Hefele, Big fan. Yeah. Their catalog is a book this thick. Yeah, so they have every hardware known to mankind, and really. But you have to set up an account with them. They don't just.
What's the name of that?
Hefele. H-A with an umlaut, F-E-L-E.
Obviously German.
Originally from Germany, but there is Hefele USA. And,
I know where you're
I mean, come on.
Do you,
It's obvious.
do you personally have I mean, I think getting the setup is hard enough, and yet I would think in your mind you're going between millimeters and 1/16 of an inch, and it makes it even more difficult.
No, because you don't.
You go millimeters.
You're committed. You don't translate. You don't converse. You stay within the system, and then it's actually easy. I mean, easier.
So you would install these on the bottom of your point base cabinets.
Also, pay attention where I located it.
Yeah.
I put some of the weight on my vertical piece.
Right.
I don't want to put the stress on my bottom panel and the joint of the bottom panel. Yeah. So I'm getting the support from the vertical strength of the strength of my vertical side.
That, the foot bed is designed so that when you go put it in place, you install the 5 feet, put it in place, and then you reach under to adjust.
Correct.
The leveling.
Yeah, I attach all my 5 feet on the cabinets first, store them away, and then at installation I will adjust accordingly as I add one cabinet to the other. You will see.
This just pops in.
And that just pops in, yeah. And they're extremely lightweight, but quite strong. Quite strong. Yes, please. Yep. So there you see them attached, upside down everything now. Yes.
That's a thing going.
All right. Another thing I have not pointed out yet. This is important for installation, which is coming up. This is an upper cabinet. An upper cabinet side receives a cutout towards the top in a very specific dimension and at very specific height. Also, the back panel receives a cutout. That happened obviously before glue up. All cut on the table saw. This is not rocket science, so if we're 1/8 of an inch bigger, we don't care. But we need a hole here, and we need a hole in the side of the cabinet. Here you see how the screws reinforce the biscuit joinery of my melamine cases. Next. And then, this is a piece of hardware. You can film that. You see that? It's upside down now. And it gets screwed in with 2 screws into the inside of my upper case, hitting the top. So it's in the far upper corner, squeezed in, and attached with these 2 screws. These 2 screws have something to do with installation later. So just bear in mind, every upper cabinet now has 2 of these.
What is it called?
It's a hook. I mean, we call it a hook. We would have to look at the catalog, really, in terms of how they call it.
So upper corners.
All upper cabinets in both corners in the rear receive one of these guys. And obviously there's a left and a right design.
You are installing a plate.
You will see in a second, yes. Next. So this is what it looks like when the hook is installed on the inside of the upper cabinet. So it grabs, this is what the hook is, yeah? So every upper cabinet has this, twice. There's one cutout here in the back. Yes? All right, time to install, prepare lower cabinets. They receive drawer slides. This is the drawer slide for the undermount. So it's actually a pretty massive hardware, considering other slides that are side hung. They're a bit more discreet. However, once installed and drawer sits in place, you see nothing. They're completely invisible. As much real estate as they're taking up in your casework, they're quite invisible. But here, look at this. Instructions for this one is 1, 2, 3. Hole number 4 will go into this hole. Done. No measurement, no nothing. It's in the right place. The holes tell it where to go. I have a hole in the front, I have a hole in the rear. For this particular slide, we knew 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll find the hole. Done. A thing of beauty. Yes?
I'm assuming then that dimension is determined by what type of drawer front you have.
Drawer front?
Is the door front going to be set in flush or is it going to overlap? Is that determined?
Remember, my drawer box is separate from the drawer front. I have a false front. My front will touch this outside edge and cover most of it. My drawer box, the front of the box, is practically flush with this outside. Does that make sense now?
Well, I understand what you're saying there. You're talking about an overlay on there, but if the choice to begin with was to make the drawer front inset so that it's nice flush with the front, then the position of this hinge would have to change.
Hinge?
So
That's the guide.
The slide. It's going to have to go back in.
Gizmo.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm not sure if I would do that. But I mean, with these guys, you kind of need to hide them. I don't recommend an insect drawer with this kind of slide.
Well, the drawer in the front could be attached the same in either case. You just slide it in instead of having it overlap.
Yeah, obviously the position, if you were to do that, yes, you're right.
Do the second
drawer
hole.
has to be set back to allow for the drawer to come in further. Sure. Yeah, you're right. Again, same thing. My 2 screws that receive the plate of the hinge find 2 of these holes. Yeah. So there's no pre-drilling, no measuring, no finding where do I put my hinge. How do I make sure that my pocket hinge in the door aligns with the plate in the case? It's all determined by these holes. That's why people make such a fuss over the system. It's all part of everything. And of course there's shelf pin holes at the same time.
So that looks a little light for your beautiful 4-quarter solid bottom door there. Is it enough to pair those hinges and enough to carry that big beautiful door you have on the bottom?
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, doesn't that thing weigh?
The door is relatively heavy, but these hinges are strong. Oh yeah.
I'll tell you what.
2 of those, you're done. Yeah. And okay, back please. I want you to notice this screw. Oh, you can't see the other ones. These are adjustment screws. So just a heads up, there's movement in here. These screws hold it firmly to the case, but a second layer allows for movement. All right, next. This is a part of the drawer. This is the front of my drawer box. You see again the profile of my glue joint. A little bit. You see the hole that the groove created from making the drawer bottom, but we don't care because all this will be covered with a false front.
That hole and the hinges I have on the back of the door is essential to hold the drawer down onto the slide.
Actually, it's yet another hole. It's not enough. It's in a different place. I have to make a different hole. So, but this is what we call the clip, and it gets screwed into the front of the drawer, pushed into the corner. Rather strange looking contraption, but again, with adjustment abilities, both left to right and up and down. Yeah. This clip interacts with the slide in one particular place. You literally place the drawer box you pull the 2 drawer slides out, you put the box on there, and then you just close everything until you hear 2 clicks, and you're done. There's no, you don't have to attach slide hardware to the drawer box. It just sits there, held by the drawer. There's actually, by the slide, there's a little hook in the rear of the slide that grabs a little hole that I have not photographed in the rear of the drawer, so it doesn't fall out when you pull it. But this happens in 2 corners, left and right corner on the underside of the drawer. Yes? All right, now it's big day, installation. So this is the original kitchen. Doors are removed, drawers are removed, appliances are still in place. So this is how I hired some contractors to help me with all that. Next, please. Front view, next. Boom. 10 minutes later, it looked like that. It was kind of scary. Like, what did you do? And they just cleaned it all out. Yes? And then they went to work. So the plumbing had to be rearranged because I decided to move things around a bit, where I basically moved my sink 1 unit over to the left. So what used to be my sink, my water connection here, moved over here, so he had to open up the wall. We also did electrical work to make sure that all appliances have power where they need it. There are some code requirements that you need to watch, that especially above the counter, there have to be outlets of a certain kind on kitchen counters. I just learned that. I didn't know that. Next. So we discuss how to move this one to here, and so I have enough outlets. This is, of course, ignore the color. This is meaningless. This is from the previous kitchen. They never painted, of course, where there was a cabinet. It was all very much in the rough. Yes? And here, that's a beautiful thing. See that laser? Yum. So we had that for installation to guide us when we assembled our cabinets. Yeah. So you just mount that somewhere in the room, and it gives you a vertical and it gives you a horizontal, and then you just align everything. This is a plumb line for my lower cabinets. This is my top edge of my top of the cabinets, which you need to account for the thickness of the future countertop. So you add to the height of that. And so that was a very helpful tool for installing. We didn't have to draw pencil lines with a level, which can be done that way, of course, but this is a nice upgrade. Yes. Here you see the feet in action. So they're installed, and we made appropriate adjustments in the height. Also notice how far back they sit here in the front. And that is, of course, my kickback there, where we will have eventually later on, I want you to see this in a later photo, a base plate to cover that gap, and it gets there. You attach another piece of plastic here to the rear side of my wooden piece here, and it just snaps onto the feet. Yeah. So they're just these little springy plastic prongs, and they just grab the foot and boom, done.
Base cabinet attached to the wall.
The base cabinet, no.
So it's not actually anchored in place at all.
It will be later. You'll see. Well, no, I don't have a photo of that. He asked how much are the base cabinets anchored to the wall or the floor. We actually have the neighbor of this is the dishwasher cabinet, which isn't a cabinet. It's just a vertical side and 2 rails. If you go back, 2 rails like this in front and back, and a vertical side. And that vertical side, of course, could easily sway out. So we anchored that with brackets into the floor.
The dishwasher.
The dishwasher, which is, of course, attached to this. And on the far left in the wall, we anchored into the wall. The far left end of these cabinets, because we started in the corner, that gets anchored into the left wall. Okay, forward. More. This is my metric ruler for millimeters, so you know. Then, obviously, something was a little off in our measurements when we cut the holes for the plumbing, but hey, it's a lot of stuff happening at the same time. But anyway, we accommodate what the plumber wanted. You need to create access. Later on, there will be another hole here, power to come from the right into this outlet. So all that stuff happens on site in collaboration with electrician, plumber. You need to discuss that unless you know this yourself, how to do this. I relied on outside help. And then you wait. You don't prepare that in the shop. You wait until you get detailed instructions. Hey, I need a hole right there. Boom, you got it. I'll make you a hole. Good. Here are these metal rails that we attach to the wall, the rear wall, with the help of that nice laser level. Yeah. And you can see how the cabinet with the cutouts, this is where the hook grabs it. There's a little lip here, and it grabs that metal from the top. And you attach it with multiple screws, ideally where you have studs, for really strong anchoring. If you run out of studs and you still want support, then you do something with an anchor, yeah, just to give it more support. And all the cabinets hang off this. Next. We start in the corner. We had a corner cabinet. This is a visible surface, so we had to add this panel before the next cabinet can be attached to it. There's a cabinet growing out to the left. My building had this weird little protrusion that was a load-bearing post, so I couldn't mess with it. So I had to cut out my cabinet to accommodate that. So custom work happening on site, installation obviously. You see the hook here, how it grabbed. We have a similar rail running in the backside of these guys. Right there, you see the rail, yeah. I later covered this with a little box. Next. Then you adjust the clip. You wait until all cabinets hang. You wait until you know everything. Basically, the puzzle fits. All the cabinets are in a somewhat decent place. And then you need to shift them around, make them, they all want to be flush on top with each other. They want to be plumb. You mess around with that, and when you like it, then you tighten the hook. And the screws make the hook grab that rail really tight. First, they had play while it's supported, but now they're actually locked in position.
You account for wall variations.
That happens with that. We didn't even have to shim out that rail. It was beautiful. We were able to actually really, I mean, the wall was pretty decent. There weren't bad humps or anything like that. But we didn't even shim out that rail. Because these hooks are flexible, they can grab them in different places.
So the load is carried through the hook to
the wall, to the rail on the wall. And of course, all cabinets are screwed to each other from side to side. Once you commit to the position, you wait until you like where everything is, then you drill through and you put 4 screws per cabinet side to its neighbor. Just regular drywall screws. Yes, please.
So you might have mentioned this. Where do you buy these?
This is all distributed by Hefele.
And
I bought everything from Hefele. My hinges, my drawer slides, my hooks, my...
Laser level?
Oh,
is that local?
One, no, I don't know where he got his. I forgot where he got his.
You might get that locally.
Rent it from
Yes, you can get that.
Yeah.
You can rent it.
What do you do at the bottom?
Yeah.
The bottom of the upper cabinet, the way the treatment?
Well,
How do you keep
have
it?
it go in and out. Because you're on a plate up here, there's nothing at the bottom of the cabinet.
The hook is within the cabinet. It's not sticking out of the cabinet.
I understand. But that, if the cabinet's away from the wall by the width of that rail.
It's not. It's not. The rail is embedded in the backside of the cabinet. It completely disappears. It does not keep the cabinet from touching the wall.
Yes, Mother. I understand.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, if you've got a 3-4
Start
foot tall upper cabinet,
Yeah.
that's holding it in place at the top. What's it? Just in and out.
It's just hanging. It's just hanging, and it's stable. It's just touching the wall with its rear edge, and because it's screwed to its neighbor, everything is becoming super stiff and rigid. Nothing sways. Nothing moves.
The sides and bottom are touching the wall.
No more cleats.
Well, if your wall is,
When you go to this catalog, is this system called something? This whole system?
You just go to kitchen cabinet mounting hardware. You should find it. Yeah, we need to wrap it up here. So here, cabinets are in place. Here's that dishwasher cabinet I talked about. This is the sink. This kind of arrangement for the sink cabinet gives you maximum size, so you don't have to cut out for the sink later after the fact. Here, I would have had to cut out. If I had built it this way, I would have to cut out for the sink. Whereas here, I have the whole thing available for my sink. Here, the back wall, back please. Before we install the cabinets, of course, all the painting has to be done.
Oh, yeah.
So I painted the wall gray, everything exposed that you don't see, that you see later on, painted. Then install, electric work is finished, all in place. Yes, please.
Did you have any power to your uppers?
Pardon?
Did you have any power to your uppers?
Power to my uppers. What do you mean by power?
Place to plug in the lights to go underneath your uppers.
Nope. No, I did that in a different way. Inside drawer box, ready to receive false front. Remember the decorative panel, this is an outside of the peninsula. This layer here is a decorative beach panel, whereas this layer is the melamine case. We let it protrude to accommodate for the thickness of door and drawer face. So it becomes a nice clean look after the fact. So drawer is mounted. Next. Now we have a drawer face. We work with shims. Yeah, this is how we position it. But before we do that, next, we use hot glue and we push our drawer face in place where we like it. In a few seconds, the hot glue is dry and it allows me to pull out the drawer now and screw in from within to attach the drawer face to the drawer box. How to do that? There are several solutions, several methods how people do that. We're very happy with the hot glue. It's so prompt and it doesn't have double stick tape is often suggested, but doesn't always grab enough. Yeah, that you get the drawer out and before you know it, it moved on you a little bit. So of course we want to create equal gaps, but even so, even if that didn't work out perfectly, the clips I showed you earlier that are mounted from underneath allow for vertical and sideways adjustment. So you can actually make small corrections.
You have to clamp the front to spread the glue out to make sure you don't have a blob.
No, it's just push hard and it takes care of it. And it happens really fast. Yes? There we go. Yeah? And then, of course, he opens the door and reaches in from below to push the drawer out. Now you can screw it. You could even clamp it then for extra measure, but it is already in the right place. Yes, please? And now this is sort of a few views from the finished installation. Again, that door detail now with frosted glass in the door, so you see the effect. Finished, all lacquered. Final adjustment of the hinges, and it's all about creating even looking gaps between doors, cabinets, and drawers. And thankfully, with all that adjustment that is available, we can create a nice consistency there with the gaps. Yeah. Then the stone people came. That was, of course, a big day when they came in and they prepared. They came twice, so they come first to take measurements and they make a template for their stone top according to how I installed the cabinets. That's committed now. And then they come back and they install with very little time. They have already pre-cut the opening, of course, for the sink. And in this case, this is an undermount sink. So it does not have a lip to rest on. It actually gets attached from below. And they did that. That was their job to attach that. You see the appliances already in place. And then here, this is the island, the peninsula, with a sort of decorative back panel that we made. This is just plywood. And I attached 1/4-inch strips of wood in a pattern that sort of implies frame and panel, but it's actually all fake. Yeah, this is not nearly as well constructed as the doors themselves, but I wanted to give the look of the door. And this covers, I had to go up here to cover the control panel of the oven. Yeah. Next. And then at the very, very end, you pick hardware. I went a whole completely different route. First I thought, oh my God, as a designer, I will agonize over choosing hardware with brushed nickel and whatever, you know. And then I go, no, I'll go a completely different route. Fire engine, red glass. Boom. And I decided that in 5 minutes. And I was so relieved. It was great. I love it. It looks really good. But I was afraid that that's going to be a tough one. This is all installed now. A tower of drawers, sink cabinet, stainless steel dishwasher. Next. This is a very interesting stone that I really liked. It's actually some form of granite, but it actually reminded me a little bit, I think I have a photo. Boom. A while back, I built a table out of ambrosia maple. And when you go back to the photo of the stone, that's sort of a wooden quality to it in a way, in a strange way. Unusual stone, I've never seen it before. They call it meteor shower granite. Next. 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 Little detail of that stone. And the precision of the stone cable is impressive. Look at this little notch they made to accommodate my frame. I was like, my God, they worked this like wood. It's impressive. Including drilling holes. I think I have a photo of that. No. Upper cabinet. I covered my header here, my decorative header, with beech. It had a different wood before, so I wanted it all to become part of the same design. The deep cabinet above the refrigerator, there you expressed some concern about how the hooks hold everything nice and plumb. Well, that is so deep that I needed to put a vertical support cleat here. Yeah, because just the hooks alone in the back, I didn't trust them. Yeah, so some support here in the wall I found helpful.
Is your oven on the island?
Yeah, next.
How do you?
Yeah, these guys, they just take a drill and drill into stone. It's impressive. With water. Next. And they put a sponge around it to absorb the water so they don't make a mess. And then, next. Boom, I have 2 holes for my faucet and my soap. And this is the floor rail that touches the brick floor, and it snaps on, and you actually leave a gap up there. So we did a little fitting to the custom fitting to the irregular brick floor, so it looks clean. But we were not worried about a fit to the top of the cabinet. You never see it. and it's held in place by the clips, so we don't rely on this top edge to attach to the case. Yeah.
What if you had crawling insects in your house?
Well,
That's to let them out.
That could become an issue.
Yeah.
So once again, before, and I think I have a picture after. So,
You don't have any system to evacuate odors off the
no, I just, my house is so small. If I had a hood up here, it would be so dominating in the room. I didn't want that.
So is that an electric stove?
It's an electric stove.
Okay.
How long did the project take to start to finish? 2 years.
See, I was working also, you know, so it's hard to tell.
Couple of months.
It could have been done in a couple of months. Yes. No, in my defense, I traveled for a month, so I was gone.
Wow.
One more time for the source. What was the name of the company that you got?
Hefele.
Can you put it on the board?
H-A-F-E-L.
It's A with an umlaut, you know, the little dots on top.
H-A.
H-A-F-E-L-E. So you call them, there's Hefele USA. It's a big company, and you basically need to establish an account with them. They don't have retail stores or anything.
If
It's
your
mail order
typing
only.
is in on a computer, you would make it H-A-E-F-E-L-E.
You could, unless you tell your computer to get you a German keyboard. You can do that too.
How small
someone asked me during intermission, and I don't have to make a secret out of this. So I bought all the appliances new as well. So dishwasher, refrigerator, and range. And I kept track of my expenses. So I can imagine you're curious about expenses. So materials. Then of course don't underestimate who you need to bring in as outside help. Yeah, plumbing, electrician, stone, all that. But after it's all said and done, including the new appliances, I'm right now at about $8,500. Klaus and I think this is probably a $25,000 kitchen. So in terms of a commercial job. So well worth the effort.
How small an order will they? How small can it be? What's their minimum?
Oh no, they don't. They're not expensive actually. They're not that expensive, and you can order small quantities. Yeah, no problem. You just have to pay for shipping.
Right. Well, I mean, some places minimum orders $100.
I don't know. I don't believe they do. No. Any other questions before we wrap up? I know we're late.
You did good.
You all have to go anywhere?
We're good. Any questions?
I got everything.